So let's get into some news. Speaking of big, fat pillows, um,
Thanks
Dirk
for noticing.
Gently, yeah, Dirk Gently season two is a thing, and they have already added a lot of people to this cast. A lot of people that have had success, have had some not success, but they've added John Hannah, who you will know as oh god, I am blanking on his name. But he was in Agents of Shield. He played the guy who created Ada. Amanda Walsh, who was in New Girl, and
Not New
Alan
Girl, Lost
Tudyk,
Girl.
or sorry, Lost Girl, um, one of those girl shows. Alan Tudyk, who you might know as the punchline to the joke, how does a Reaver clean its spear, from Firefly? Yeah, and then he was also on the recently canceled TV show Powerless. We'll get to the some of that stuff in a future episode.
Losing Powerless is also left in hole in some people's hearts.
Yes. And then Alex Pujanovic, from War of the Planet of the Apes, have all signed on. And so I'm going to real quickly go through the characters, starting with Alan Tudyk. He will play Mr. Priest. And have you read the Dirk Gently books?
I have, but I can't say that the show is doing anything like what
Yeah.
you've read in the books. I don't believe that the characters, other than Dirk himself, really, are from the books in any way, shape, or form. It's. I'm not sure if it's so much a reinvention of what the books are, or if it's a continuation of the story from the books, or what. I think that the comic series was going to be doing something that we were going to bridge from the books to the show, but then the comic series got canceled.
The comic series was taking the if you're talking about Salmon of Doubt, it was taking the parts
The
that were
unfinished.
finished of Salmon of Doubt and wrap that up. I don't know if it was
They
if
were
it's
planning on doing something
yeah.
past that, and it didn't go any
Yeah.
further.
So let's start with Alan Tudyk. He'll be playing Mr. Priest, a ruthless, dangerous, and violent bounty hunter working for Blackwing. And they give the credits of he worked in Rogue One where he played K2SO, Firefly where he played Wash, and then Powerless. And oh hey, it tells you who he's rep by because it's the Hollywood Reporter, and they always do that. Hannah is set to play the mage, a powerful wizard who takes great pleasure in doing evil and seeking to conquer a world not his own. And he is the one who played the dude from Agents of Shield.
And
And
he
then
was in the Mummy movies.
yeah,
He was also in, was it Four Weddings and a Funeral, where he gives the oh yeah, he does the thing about his significant other died, and he gives this beautiful sort of poetic speech about him at one of the funerals. It's awe-striking. It is one of those things that
yeah,
will just make you cry. Anytime I think of him, that's always the first thing I go to. Even with the Mummy movies and other stuff he's done, it's just that scene always kind of like comes back to me. He's a very good actor, and it's so weird that we recognize him from these very Americanized genre type things, but that's not really what he came from, and it's cool that we get to see him wind up in some other fun stuff like this.
yeah. Walsh will portray Susie Boratin, an unassuming, insecure, depressed soccer mom who was selected for an unexpected role by the mage and gradually reveals her true, terrifying self to our heroes. And then Patrinovic, the last one, rounds out the group as Weiger Oak, a dominating enforcer for the uh, Deng Damer royal family. He's been in Van Helsing, Supernatural, and all that.
And
And,
apparently
and
Tyler Labine
yeah,
is going to be a part of this, which I didn't know.
I
Which I
that's
guess we
why I
missed that.
paused.
And
Yeah,
Tyler Labine had been in Tucker and Dale versus Evil with Alan Tudyk, which is great to see them get to do a reunion. And I hope it leads to a sequel of that movie at some point. We've been
yeah.
hoping for that for a long time. And I haven't seen Labine in a lot of stuff recently. It seemed like he kept getting shows that kept getting canceled. Not
Yeah,
that Tudyk's any stranger to that either, but
the last show he had that I knew of was at Deadbeat that was on Hulu, but then I think it got canceled or they went on one more season either where he was with Cal Penn or something along those lines. I don't remember what it was exactly. I've always liked him since seeing him in Reaper, and it was one of those like you see him in and he was in Con Man season 2. He had a small part in one of the episodes for Con Man.
which is great because that means more
But
stuff with
I mean,
Tudyk.
yeah, and I mean and he's in Super Troopers 2 apparently.
Now, with the amount of characters that they're
Yeah.
introducing, and with the descriptions of some of them, I kind of wonder. We know that Samuel Barnett as Dirk Gently and Elijah Wood as Todd Brotzman are coming back, but I wonder if we're going to get a continuation with some of the other characters we got from the first season, like Hannah Marks's character, who is Todd's sister Amanda, Fiona Dourif, who I really liked as the kind of like crazy person who had some similarities to Dirk Gently, came from sort of a similar experimental thing and is chasing him down the whole time and couldn't
Mhm.
be. She was indestructible because of her mission. And the Farrah Black character, which was Jade Etchley, I liked all of those characters, and I guess I shouldn't expect them to come back in the next season because they do want to try to bring in and invent a new story. But I'll be disappointed if we don't see at least some follow up with them, because they were all really great, and the actresses who played them were really great. Also, in the first season, we had, and I didn't expect him to come back, but we had Julian McMahon was kind of like the surprise. You didn't recognize who it was until like they really wanted you to, but he was kind of a big deal. Like, oh, I didn't expect Julian McMahon to be in this, and then he was a great part of it, but he wasn't. They didn't have him steal stuff away from everybody else.
Yeah, this is where I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to say this on air again, and I know I'm a bad person, but I still need to finish the first season of Dirk Gently.
Yeah, and I don't have a big issue with that, because I do think that it probably plays better all in a row. It's a short series. It was only 8 episodes. And getting it all at once, you'll feel a little bit more of you won't be as confused each week when you come back and need to get the refresher.
I think I was at episode 5 or 6. I think when I had fallen behind, and then seen it, which I sort of took this wind out of the sails. Like the week that it ended, it was out on Target on DVD. I'm like, wait, what? And they did this with the PBS series Victoria. They actually released it before it finished on PBS, and I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense. But whatever, that's besides the point. So I am looking forward to going back and catching up before, because this is what I did with Into the Badlands. Actually, the same thing is I missed out on a few of the episodes, so I ended up rewatching some of the episodes, partially because I didn't know exactly where I left off, but then more as a wrap up, like like a refresher, and then just started doing season 2, and I've been watching it. Like I might have gotten one episode behind and then watched both on like the previous episode and the current episode that's next Sunday. And so I'll probably do something like that with it.
I kind of feel bad because I'm pretty sure I got further in Iron Fist, which I still have not finished, but I think I got further in Iron Fist than I did into the Badlands. And I think it's strictly because Iron Fist ties into the Defenders and the whole Marvel Universe thing. Into the Badlands, I got frustrated with the writing and some of the characterization on the show. I certainly didn't like the teenage boy that it became all about, but the fight scenes were so good. It was so inventive that I enjoyed it for that. And whereas Iron Fist, I feel like it's got neither of those things.
Yeah. No, that's the big thing is like Into the Badlands. Like I enjoy for what it is Iron Fist, but it's like when you have a show like Into the Badlands where the fight scenes are so incredible. Like they got me with rewatching some of the scenes or some of the episodes from the first season, and they're doing wire work martial arts on loose rock. I'm like, yeah, how the fuck did they not break an ankle? Like if I were to have tried any of these things, it'd have been like, ah, like I'm letting out the girliest of screams as my ankle is shattered.
Well, I'm gonna let you in a little secret. They have had some training, and they are in just a bit better shape than you and I are.
Hey, round is a shape.
Round is a shape.
But no, I mean, honestly, all in all, I am excited.
See a lot of donuts with broken ankles, I guess.
Yeah. I am excited for this, and there will be a 10-episode second season of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, premiering later this year on BBC America. On to the second news story, and this is that Jeff Johns and Gary Frank are Reunite for the DC/Watchmen crossover Doomsday Clock. Now, the reason why I picked this article, well, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Is because this is the long play of Jeff Johns' whole DC Rebirth thing. For those of you who don't know, DC Rebirth came out, the one shot came out last year, and at the end of it, they had alluded to the fact that Dr. Manhattan was behind the New 52. He's the one that's just, fucking everything up. And
no, who fucked everything up was the people who made the New 52, and Rebirth was basically to try to fix that shit. Let's be real here. Let's tell it like it is that the New 52 became looked at as a huge mistake, even with some good things in there, but overall it was not beloved by many people, certainly not by classic fans or even more recent fans. It had its own new fandom. Certainly had people who came into the New 52 when it started and felt attached to the characters the way they were and liked the romance between Superman and Wonder Woman and liked some of the things they did. But many people stopped reading the DC books. And there was a lot of things that were just strange. Like they could not figure out what the story was, the history of Bart Allen or Tim Drake or most of the Titans in general. They just kept going back and forth trying to fix things. There was Lobo, but then later on it turned out he wasn't really Lobo. There was Phobo that came out, and I assume there was eventually a Bobo and no Hobo. It was a lot of mess. When Crisis on Infinite Earths happened back in the mid 80s, they had a similar problem that affected the Legion of Superheroes, because the Legion of Superheroes didn't work anymore because it was always based around there being a Superboy to inspire them. And now there wasn't a Superboy. They cleared that out with John Byrne's Man of Steel series. So it took some years of doing. It took until I think they finally got to around Zero Hour, which is another crossover years later, to get the Legion to make a degree of sense again. With the New 52, they didn't do any of that. They just screwed it all up. So now what Rebirth did, and there was that miniseries crossover thing that happened for a couple of months that kind of like led to some of the stuff that happened in Rebirth. Cataclysm? Am I remembering that right?
Cataclysm was Marvel.
Okay, what was DC's? Conjunction Junction?
Convergence?
Cockholster? Convergence, yes. So DC had 2 months where they
Donald Trump. Convergence.
It's not anti-gay, it's anti-Trump. What Convergence kind of said, okay, so the old universe as it existed, here's what happened with some of those characters. And that's kind of where they stole Superman and Lois and their son Jonathan from that to then reintroduce them into the DC universe with Rebirth, and then combine and get rid of the New 52 Superman and the New 52 Lois Lane overall. And then they kind of wiped out the whole continuity of Superman ever dating Wonder Woman and a bunch of other stuff that just didn't work. People wanted their classic Superman. And it's like, yeah, we're going to bring you back classic Superman and classic Lois. We're also going to give him a kid for some reason. So there's still some, like, now both their two biggest characters in the DC universe have preteen children. That's a little different from what they were saying, which is we don't want our characters to age. And now it's like, yeah, they've aged, they've got kids, which is total opposite of what Marvel would allow to happen to Spider-Man, which is its own fucking mess. So Rebirth, and in Rebirth, one of the things they started introducing, like you said, was the Watchmen connection. This idea that there's a Mr. Oz that we all presume is Ozymandias from Watchmen. There are references to Dr. Manhattan and the Watchmen button, which you are reading the buttons crossover right now between Flash and Batman, which also deals a little bit with Flashpoint, as I understand it.
Yes. Okay. So this is where I get to talk. The whole Rebirth thing has been a slow burn, in all honesty. Like the DC Rebirth one shot that did a lot of the setup stuff for what the Rebirth titles would be came out last year. This year we've gotten, this is what, the second crossover book, and I'm putting an asterisk on there because there's technically 3, but one of them is Superman Reborn, which takes place in Superman and Action Comics, which is sort of cheating as a crossover because it's the same person for both books.
But it's been a while since we've had that. It's been a while, because it used to be that the Superman books, they would come out, there were 4 Superman books a month, and they were numbered in such a way that all through the year you had a little triangle on the cover. So even though it was Action Comics number whatever and Superman number whatever and Man of Steel number whatever, the little triangle would tell you what number of the story you were buying that week. And it was because it was weekly, it was just continue one to the other. Spider-Man did that for a while as well. But since the New 52 came out, not that there's been no crossovers, but it's been limited. And Rebirth as much as that.
I mean, they did the crossovers that they've done. I mean, you're looking at Suicide Squad versus versus Justice League, Superman Reborn, and then now the Button. There hasn't really been, and then they're doing the Judas.
There's a Teen Titans one, right? Yeah, Teen Titans.
That started last week. That was not the Judas contract, but it was something like along those lines. Anyways. So the Button it's actually wrapping. We're recording this on Tuesday, the 16th. The Button wraps up tomorrow. It wraps up on Wednesday with Flash 22, because it's a 4-part thing. Takes place in Batman and Flash 21 and 22, respectively.
Written by Johns, at least of the Flash portions.
No, written by. I
know Tom King was doing some of the Batman stuff.
Tom King is doing the Batman one. Robert Venditti is doing the Flash one.
Okay.
Jeff Johns has some say in it, like he's helping. It's more like he's an editor or something in it than he's writing any of the book.
Well, I mean, Jeff Johns is King DC at this point.
Well, yeah. So what we've seen with this is and I actually talked about issue number 1 a while back ago when it came out, but issue number 1, I kid you not, takes all of 5 minutes to read. And that's if you're a slow reader, because it's a lot of action in the timeline. It only takes place in the course of maybe 2 minutes, with Batman fighting the Reverse Flash all in this time of a minute that it's going to take the Flash to get to the Batcave. At the end of that, Reverse Flash dies. We go to to Flash, where they're doing, I forget exactly what they're doing, but they're trying to figure out where the like what's up with the Button and why Reverse Flash died. Takes them to Flashpoint because why not? They're on the cosmic treadmill, and it's almost like someone pulled them into Flashpoint. Cut to Batman, which I have that one in lenticular, and I like that lenticular cover actually, where you have Reverse Flash and the Thomas Wayne Batman over dead parents, and you're going through like it's sort of like DC's Spider-Man, the Spider-Man series that Brian Michael Bendis did, but just in the one issue, because you have Bruce Wayne and Thomas Wayne both reconnecting in a way that could not have happened, because they are each other's reason for becoming Batman.
Right. We should probably explain a little bit that Flashpoint was a series, came out several years ago, that was written by Johns at the time, that dealt with the Reverse Flash going back in time and affecting things, and Barry's decisions to try to correct them, which includes the death of his mother and things that changed the entire universe, which is what led directly from that into the New 52 universe. And so there was never actually a resolve for Flashpoint in and of itself. It's like Flashpoint happens, and here's the new DC universe as you know it from this, which I don't even think was even the plan of Flashpoint at the time that they were plotting it. And it kind of became, hey, we're going to relaunch all the DC books, so have Flashpoint lead into that. Some have argued, who may be in the know or not, that Jeff Johns didn't really like that, both for his story and for the direction of the New 52, how it happened and why he wasn't a bigger part of it when it happened.
Yeah. And so with that issue 22 of Batman, that does sort of serve as, in my opinion, that would serve as the ending of Flashpoint, because it does sort of put on that nice little bow to that whole thing. Cut to Flash 22. I don't know, I haven't read it yet, but in there at the end of it, they have a 4-page epilogue that will be the preview to Doomsday Clock, which comes out in November of this year of 2017. And we do not know how long the miniseries is going to be, but they're billing it as Superman versus Dr. Manhattan and the conflict between optimism and pessimism.
There's a lot of rumors going on with this. Some of the things is they focus on the button itself, the Watchmen button, and as they kind of hone in on it, we see the blood change from red to blue, and as we zoom in and then start to zoom back out, we see it actually become the S symbol from Superman's chest. But there's questions as to whether it's actually Superman's chest that we're seeing. And a lot of the rumor and conjecture right now is that it's actually Superboy Prime. And Superboy Prime is something that Geoff Johns utilized even further back in a miniseries called Final Crisis. And Superboy Prime was actually created in the first Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was a Superboy of a planet. He was their first superhero. And then that Earth got destroyed by the Anti-Monitor, and he was the only one to escape from it. And eventually, at the end of that series, he and Alex Luthor, who was the son of Lex Luthor from Earth 3, and the Superman and Lois Lane of Earth 2, the classic Superman and Lois from essentially the Golden Age, they were the only ones who survived from these other planets that all went into this pocket universe and kind of sat there in eternity. And then Final Crisis brings them back, but Superboy Prime goes crazy and starts killing people. Superboy Prime is famously the guy who punched the walls of reality, which is what allowed Jason Todd to come back to life, and a bunch of other things that they wanted to explain. They're like, well, we can just say that Superboy Prime did it when he came back and was breaking the universe a little bit. So Superboy Prime also came back later on, still villainous, in the Legion of Three World series, also written by Geoff Johns, which reintroduced the, at that point in time, dead characters of Connor Kent, the Con-El Superboy, and Bart Allen, Impulse, who at that point became Kid Flash. When all of that happened, you know, it was supposed to be the return to some of these classic characters, and it was a very similar story. It was like the optimism versus the pessimism. Superboy Prime, John said he was writing him like an internet troll or like a comics fanboy who just hates everything, which has a validity, but kind of got old. And so my concern is that seeing this and the idea is that it could be Superboy Prime, because he is kind of a pet of Geoff Johns' stories, if it's going to feel like a rehash, and because DC, some of the things that we're supposed to be hopefully getting back soon would be things like the Justice Society and the Legion of Superheroes, it would kind of make sense for this story to lead into some of that. Both of those would have ties to Superman, the Legion especially. Could be the return of Connor, but maybe then Connor lives in the future with the new Legion, because we don't necessarily need another Superboy here in this time when we've got Jonathan Kent as Superboy in the Super Son series. We might get Bart back. It would be nice to have Bart, although we've got a Kid Flash and Wally, was Kid Flash that is Flash, and then Barry as Flash. So we got a lot of Flashes. So the same thing, maybe Bart goes to the future. It's hard to say what all is going to come from it. I just hope that it's not so much of a rehash as it is something that's going to finally put a cap on this stuff. Yeah. Because a lot of what Geoff Johns does, it feels like we've done it before, and he is the writer who likes to take the universe and fix the holes that other people have made. But in a lot of cases right now, this is holes that he was involved in making. Yeah. It may be because it wasn't his choice. It may be because Dan DiDio and Jim Lee were trying to go in a different direction with the universe, which was perfectly within their rights to do, because they're also editors of the company, and they were trying to control some of the creative vision for it at that time. But whatever the case is, right now, people are pretty happy with the state of the Superman books as they are. Yeah. So seeing how this pays off, it's got a lot more weighing on it than I think fixing the New 52 Superman did. The New 52 Superman, a lot of people just did not enjoy. It was directionless. We know that there was points in time where one writer had no idea what the other writer was doing and kept having his stories changed at the last second. It was rudderless for a while. It did get better towards the end, but correcting all of that to make the classic Superman return seems to have worked for the Superman books in particular. So it's important to not wreck that right now when people are actually kind of happy.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, for me, you when you would say, you know, there were people who enjoyed the New 52 Superman, that's me. That's the Superman I came in on is that one. And I agree, with the whole, talk about one talking about, one writing something and then having to have it changed because someone else, Grant Morrison, is using Superman and is also writing a Superman book, and they're in the same timeline but different stages in the timeline, and Grant Morrison sort of trumps it because one is Grant Morrison, but two, his is before the other one, and it's just sort of like a whole mess. But where it did start to get good was with Greg Pak writing it, actually. He was writing, I believe it was Action Comics towards the end, and it was the powerless Superman. It was, the Superman who you see him wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and he has his cape torn, wrapped around his hands, and he's doing the best he can with the not all the power stripped away, but it's very,
it was very toned
minimal.
down power wise. Yeah,
it was sort of like Smallville Superman could have beaten him at this point.
It seemed to me closer to where Superman started. Superman didn't fly when he first arrived. He leapt tall buildings in a single bound. Superman's powers escalated over time as they introduced all these other characters. It's like, well, we always have to keep Superman as the most powerful. And I feel like trying to keep edging them up and giving them more powers and abilities and stuff makes the stakes harder to match that. So you always have to have world-shattering events to actually make the story have any tension. So I like a less powerful Superman. I don't like him to not be Superman, but I certainly like a Superman where, you punch him not as a human, but as another strong character, and he's going to recognize that. He's going to feel it, and he's going to have to come at it not just from a place of I'm invulnerable so I can do whatever I need to, but I have to think through this problem, not just solve the issues with my fists. So, but I definitely think Johns is the kind of creator who gets that, who has definitely done some good takes with Superman and the other characters before. I just want to make sure that he's not looking at it as I've done Green Lantern Rebirth and I've done Flash Rebirth, and now we've had the Superman Rebirth, but I want to rebirth him the way that I want to. And I just want him to come at it as, let's start telling the stories as the stories again, and not try to always change or fix the continuity. Because I felt that when they did Rebirth, I wasn't interested in the Watchmen stuff. I wasn't interested in introducing those characters. First of all, I still think it's kind of a ham-fisted way to jerk Alan Moore around, because it's like, really, Watchmen can go away at this point. No new Watchmen material is ever going to measure up to the original Watchmen material by Moore and Gibbons at this point, because they're not coming back to do it. I don't believe anybody has a story to tell with those characters that is going to impact even close to what that original series did. So why do we have to keep hammering on it? It's not like it's been 40 years of Watchmen books and we had one really great story, and so we're always trying to get back to that. It's different than Superman and Batman and all those characters that have just continued to exist all along. Watchmen was one great story and was always meant to be one great story. So the need to involve them in the rest of the DC universe seems about as bad idea to me as the need to involve the Wildstorm characters in the mainstream DC universe, which we saw with the New 52 did not work. All those characters wound up going away, and now they're back in a Wildstorm universe again.
With the exception of the ones who did work. Midnighter is still in the DC universe, and Apollo came over.
But Midnighter and Apollo are not like Midnighter and Apollo really were before that. They're not the characters as they were in Wildstorm before, because they're just copies of Batman and Superman, which is what they were played at in the first place.
Yeah.
So they exist, but they're still not the same. Not to say they're not telling really good stories with Midnighter, especially. They've done great stuff with. But I don't think it stands up in the way that it did when they could do a commentary on these characters and the kind of stories that they wanted to tell, and they needed to tell with them, because the Authority was giant, earth-shattering stories every time. But it worked because of the people that they had making those books, and they've just not been able to match that since they've gone through the mainstream DC universe.
Yeah. I'm excited for Doomsday Clock.
By the way, because it's Dr. Manhattan, can we not call it Doomsday Cock?
We probably could, but I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited for it. At the same time, it's one of those, I'm questioning the reasoning behind it being so long in between telling us. Like, if this was DC from 5-10 years ago, we would have had an explanation, be working on the new way we're going to fuck up the place, not like sort of deal. But now it just seems like we're going to take our time telling the story, and oh, Jeff wants to tell the story, so we're going to give it to him to be the one to tell it and stuff like that. I mean, it just seems weird to me.
Well, I mean, part of it too, though, is probably because Jeff is so busy in so many things that are outside of the actual comics these days that when he comes in, and they're not going to say no to Jeff Johns that he wants to do a special project, and especially when he wants to do something as big and as seemingly important as what this story is. But it is one of those things that we have to realize that his schedule, he's probably making more of his money doing stuff in the Hollywood section than he is in the print section.
You know what he's not working on right now? Writing a goddamn Batman movie.
No, nobody seems to be writing a goddamn Batman movie.
But we're not going to talk about that next. No, we're going to talk about more television news, and that is the Roseanne revival has been confirmed for ABC with the full cast returning as well. This is including Sarah Chalke, who replaced Leslie Goranson as Becky, and then got replaced back by Leslie Goranson. Now, the show ran from 88 to, when did it end? It was like 94 or something like that?
I think it was later than that. I think I was actually in California when it finished. It was 1997.
Yeah. And so the interesting part with this show is, you know, the fact that they've got everyone of the main cast or the full cast is returning, which I believe would include Johnny Galecki. He is not mentioned in the article, but Laurie Metcalf is, who is another one of his co-stars from another show. Because she plays Sheldon's mom on The Big Bang Theory.
Well, between Sarah Gilbert, Laurie Metcalf, and Galecki, they've all been characters on The Big Bang Theory, but Galecki's the only one who's got a very serious contract job to do. It may be one of those things where they're just like, yeah, of course we'll let you do it because you're one of our biggest stars on one of our biggest shows. And we want to keep you happy. We want to keep our relationships with Laurie and Sarah good because Sarah's on the Talk on CBS. Laurie had a show that didn't succeed on CBS, and this is only it's a revival. It's a short season. I think it's only 8 episodes that they're planning on doing.
Yeah,
we're seeing the same thing over on NBC where they're going to be doing a revival of Will and Grace, and it's similar to what they did with X-Files last year.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just looking through right now because, you know, one of the interesting things that I have is, or that I notice is who's executive producing this. You know, Roseanne Barr is going to executive produce this alongside Sarah Gilbert, which, you know, makes sense. But then you get Tom Werner, Bruce Helford, Whitney Cummings, and Tony Hernandez. The Whitney Cummings one is the one that sort of surprises me.
She did just have her production job open up since Two Broke Girls just got canceled.
Oh wow! I'm reading this one paragraph right here. It says, "It's interesting to see how this revival addresses the events of the series finale, which revealed the entire 9th season, the one that involved the family winning the lottery, to be a fiction." And in reality, Dan had died. That finale also introduced the concept that the show was actually Roseanne's writing. So that's another hurdle to cross in bringing the show back to the air. This is an interesting conundrum that the show has. And I think with everyone's, you know, we got Will and Grace coming back. We've got, you know, the X-Files have come back, 24, Prison Break. A lot of shows are coming back and doing revivals or, you know, reunions and stuff like that. But when you get shows that wrote themselves a nice happy bow or a bow on...
Or a very miserable bow in the case of Roseanne.
Yeah, but they've wrapped it up to where there really isn't anywhere that they could go. Do you almost think that maybe they shouldn't come back?
Well, in the case of Will and Grace, they actually flash forwarded to the future for them. We saw their kids. We saw something that obviously they're not going to be referencing, I believe, in the new series. And with Roseanne, at best, what they could do is make it do a Bobby Ewing in the shower. You know, it was all a terrible, terrible dream. Or she's Stephen Moffat. You know, she's the one who tells us that Dan's dead. She's the one who tells us that the whole last season wasn't real. It's all her voiceover that's saying that. So then she just says, haha, I lied. Because I wrote this, I can tell you whatever I want, and you have to believe it because I'm just a bitch. I don't think that matters as much. What's more interesting to me is that TV is at this point, much in the way that films are, is that doing something new is not getting the returns that they want. It's harder to come up with new concepts. It's hard to come up with new shows and make them successful. So we've been seeing remakes. We've been seeing things like the MacGyver remake, and a lot of other things that have been doing this. I think that these are a little different because it's meant to be a short run. It's meant to be an appointment viewing thing. Yeah, we're only going to get your eyes for 8 weeks, but while you're in there for that 8 weeks, maybe you'll check out the show that follows this on the network, and maybe you'll get hooked in that. Maybe you'll see commercials for some of the other stuff that ABC has. And ABC, I didn't realize this, is right now in 4th place as far as viewership goes on the main networks. And that's very surprising to me. But yeah, I kind of get it. It's just so. Yes, we're trying to steal you back with something that you're familiar with. We're trying to get back these viewers who've given up mainstream TV, maybe because they don't like any of the new stuff. We have a lot of shows that have just recently been announced as canceled,
and then later get uncanceled.
Well, yeah, and then they'll get. I mean, look at Family Guy. Family Guy was a show that did not work, that got canceled, and came back years later and has had an extremely long and successful run. Not necessarily still writing at the same level that it was early on, but it still continues to make money. It still does well for Fox, and is a show running right next to The Simpsons every Sunday and continues to pull numbers. But that show could not succeed when it was first out. These are shows that were successes. So getting these back and getting the original cast back, it certainly, there's no harm in saying, oh, I get to see these people again. I get to see these characters that I like. But it is weird because we're seeing more shows with spin-offs. We're seeing more shows that are remakes, and we're seeing more stuff like this. That all that the networks can really bring us anymore is stuff that's got a nostalgia factor as opposed to something new and interesting. I mean, even shows that I've liked that are new original shows, like Stranger Things. Stranger Things brings a lot of nostalgia factor to it. Ready Player One is built around nostalgia. It's built around that kind of fanboyish knowledge of everything that happened in the 80s on up. And these are the things that are popular right now. And it's just kind of, I'm always a little confused and a little bothered that we don't see more in the way of originality, but then we don't see the originality when it happens gaining a lot of success. Jordan Peele who just had his hit with Get Out, had the opportunity to do a live action version of one of his favorite movies, which is Akira. And he's decided to not do that because he'd rather make something of his own. He'd rather have creative control of something as opposed to doing what someone else's vision was. And I totally get where he's coming from on that. And it may not be the giant hit that the studios want. It may not be a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar blockbuster, because multi-million is shit these days, but he's proven that he can do something that is brand new, that is not a huge budget, and have it hit a huge round of success. I'm way more interested in that in theory than I am stuff like this. But I can't say that I'm not going to be back to watch this, because I watched Roseanne for a good number of years. I didn't watch the last couple of seasons. It certainly seemed to jump the shark well before they got to the point where they were winning the lottery.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see how it comes back and see everybody collected again, all these people. It was a great cast.
So interestingly enough, and I'm going to say this and I'm probably going to move on because more that could be said will be said when we get to our else words. But I was never the biggest fan of Roseanne. It's weird because I could probably watch it now and be like, okay, yeah, it's funny. It's good. But at the time, I was watching Home Improvement. I was watching Family Matters. I was watching, oh God, like stuff like that, where it was more lighter, and that where Roseanne seemed to me to be more crass and rude and stuff like that.
Which was her comedy going into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a family that didn't like each other. It was not dissimilar from Married with Children. Married with Children was like the first big show of, oh, it's the sitcom family, except everybody kind of hates each other. Yeah, which I think I watched more of Married with Children, but at that time I was a little bit older, so it was like, this is like, in wrestling, this was the Attitude Era. This is, or everyone's like, fuck you society and, stuff like that. And so where I sort of got that, but yeah, it was weird, like I won't be surprised if I do end up liking this. I won't be surprised if I, decide to binge through
Roseanne, like if I were to find it somewhere online.
At the very least, it's not dissimilar from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where you get to watch somebody start out being a young actor or actress and then get incredibly good as it goes along. And Sarah Gilbert especially is someone who started out, you know, she was just a kid. She was really young. She was good, but as the show developed, you know, her comic timing and everything just developed so much more, and she became a lot more of a center of the show. They built a lot more around her character that you would have expected they would have done with Becky. Part of it was probably because Lacey disappeared for a little while and then they had to replace her. But in general, people identified with Darlene.
Yeah.
People identified with Darlene so much that she became a character in the Max comic series, essentially. She just was someone, but you got to watch her grow up. And you've seen her, you know, since then in other things continue on that. And Laurie Metcalf, who won Emmys while the show was on, and I think there was even an after credits scene of her and Roseanne sitting there, and Becky is cleaning the Emmy, and Roseanne's like, "Give me that," and Becky's like, "No," or not Becky. What was Laurie? Well, I'm trying to remember what her character's name was.
Jackie. Sorry.
Jackie, yeah. So Jackie's sitting there like, no, I'm not going to give to you. And Roseanne's trying to reach for it and everything. But she was incredible on this. There was so much great stuff on the show that you have to recall that in 1988, when this first started, people did not expect this out of a show. People did not expect the mom of a family to be such a bitch to her kids and to her husband. And yet they still had so much love between them too. The romantic interactions between Dan and Roseanne were incredible because you really bought into how much they loved each other. But then when they fought, you could feel the heat of them fighting. You could understand their points. You could root for one or the other or both in a lot of cases. It touched on things that I don't think a lot of other sitcoms did at that point. I think a lot of other stuff that's come since owes a lot to shows like this, but this show in particular. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do today other than just repeating what they were doing then, or if what they did then is going to be enough with audiences today.
Yeah, which again, we will hit on more on that at the ElseWords. But that is going to do it for the Else News. We will be right back.